Keenan Robinson, linebacker of the Washington Redskins, picked up one of the receivers of the Baltimore Ravens and pile drove him into the ground. Absolutely pile drove him into the ground. And Steve Smith then gets into a set two with Chris Culliver. He gets ejected from the game. He ends up taking a selfie with his kids who are in the stands. So it was the first NFL game that he got to watch with his kids, I guess getting ready for the future, because as we all know, this is his last season with the Ravens. And then Harbaugh comes running across the field, gets into an argument with Jay Gruden, runs back with a little bit of a smile on his face, as it seemed. And Coach Brian Billick joining me now here on the Rich Eisen Show, Super Bowl winning head coach from the Ravens back in the day and the NFL media group now. Did you ever get into an argument face-to-face with another coach in a game?
Oh, never. Never. You know me, Rich. I'm Mr. Where's the Love?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah. No, it's going to happen any number of reasons. You got a part of it is the testosterone that's flowing, and even in a preseason game. Part of it is you got to, I've always said we don't have home plate to kick dirt on like baseball managers do. So your players need to see you defend them sometimes, even though as a coach you're going, guys, we're not doing this. We're not going to lose our cool. It's going to cost us. I mean, you're constantly lecturing them in that way. Mm-hmm. But by the same token, your players also need to see that you're going to take care of them, you're going to defend them, and that you're going to, you're going to take care of them.
But not knowing, I guess, what they were actually saying, when you see that, can you try and interpret what was happening, what may have sparked it for Harbaugh or Gruden to say something to Harbaugh and Harbaugh to go back at him?
Well, yeah, you know how it goes. You ever play racquetball or basketball with your buddies or a brother, and it's all of a sudden what is kind of in jest or the emotions going, and then you take it a step further, and they may have been channeling their Jim Harbaugh, Pete Carroll inner self.
Yeah, what's your deal, bro?
Yeah, and it's something as simple as that all of a sudden but it's preseason plus both of them, and what John's thinking is, my God, this is a preseason game. I don't want to lose anybody. That's your biggest fear, obviously, in a preseason game. So, yeah, beyond the game didn't mean anything, but obviously the emotion of it, you can get wound up in that thing.
Did Mr. Modell at any point tell you that you can't get rid of a player because I love him too much, in the same way that it appears to be what's been going on with RG3 and Washington, D.C. for so long, Coach?
I don't know that you can have that conversation as much as you have the owner going, now, I paid this guy how much? And now you want to get rid of him? I mean, that's the dilemma for Jay Gruden right now. When Daniel Snyder and Bruce Allen sat with Jay Gruden to discuss that job, I don't believe Colt McCoy or Kirk Cousins' name probably ever came up. It was all about, what can you do to get all this money and all the resources we spent on this quarterback? What are you going to do to get RG3 to be a player? And Jay Gruden sat there and said, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D. Great. Well, you get there, and it doesn't happen. And now, and I live in the Mid-Atlantic, and I keep up with the Redskins. When you watch the body language between Jay Gruden visiting with either Colt McCoy or Kirk Cousins, and then watch the body language as he talks to RG3, something's not right. And so now you were brought in to do one thing: make RG3 into the player that we thought he was when we took him. And Bruce Allen was I know he's heading for the high. Bruce Allen saying, hey, I had nothing to do with the RG3 deal, and Mike Shanahan saying, no, I'm not the one that drafted RG3. Well, somehow through osmosis, he ended up there, and you gave up a whole lot of picks for him. So now if you are indeed at the point where this guy isn't your guy, and you're having to convince them, as it looks like now, Kirk Cousins is going to start the season, whether it's the concussion or whatever, brother, you better be right. Kirk Cousins better be darn good, because you've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater to say, okay, and Jay Gruden at the end of the day, hey, I got to win. I'm going to do what I think it takes to win, because that's how I'm going to keep my job. But by doing it this way, you better be right.
That's what I wanted to ask you about, Brian Billick of the NFL Media Group, joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show, that if he did go into that meeting with Bruce Allen and with Dan Snyder and say, here's what I'm going to do to make RG3 your franchise savior once again, well, clearly it didn't work. And if he was brought in to do A, B, C, and D, it didn't happen. And now here they are at the outside of a season, and it's Kirk Cousins once again. So does that mean that if Kirk Cousins doesn't work out, even though Kirk really wasn't Jay Gruden's player to begin with, that Gruden's going to be the one who winds up eating it, Coach?
Well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the coach is always, you may not be responsible, but you're going to be held accountable. And by that I mean Jay Gruden did not draft RG3, but they took ownership of him this year, not the first year. Jay Gruden say, okay, this is what I was tasked to do, and I've got the guy, and after the first year, it's okay, this isn't going to happen. Well, they did nothing to address the quarterback position this year. So by doing so, you just took ownership of him. Just like Jeff Fisher, when they bought into Sam Bradford, Les Snead and Jeff Fisher did not draft Sam Bradford. But when they came in, and typically when you come in new, what do? I got to get my quarterback thing taken care of, because that's probably the reason you got the job, is because you're not good enough a quarterback. Well, they had Sam Bradford, all but with the injuries. They bought into that. So that's the accountability they're going to have going forward now with a quarterback that's not even still on the roster. They took ownership of him when they didn't address it in some other way. Well, Jay Gruden took ownership of RG3 when in here in the second year they did not address it in any other way. So, yeah, even though he's not the one that brought in RG3, he is going to be held accountable if there is, A, RG3 is not playing, and B, they're not very good under Kirk Cousins or Colt McCoy.
Brian Billick joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. So do you think there are other coaches around the league right now that, should RG3 be available and it fits, that they think they can rehabilitate him into being the number 2 overall pick in the draft? Do you think
absolutely, because it's going to be at the right price. You're not going to have to give up a second round or even a third round pick. There's got to be any number of coaches around the league that are sitting and looking at their quarterback position, a.k.a. Houston, as an example. You could go case by case. I mean, there's two types of teams in this league. Teams that have a quarterback, teams that don't. And if you don't, you better be in the process of getting one. What's the downside if I'm not happy about my quarterback situation, if I'm uncertain, if I am the Cleveland Browns and I'm uncertain about my quarterback situation, and I can get an RG3 for a 4th, a 5th, a future whatever, and take a flyer, and his contract is at the point right now where it's probably on the back end where it's a pretty easy number to swallow, sure. Whether you think he is going to be that, capable of that first-round pick status that he was when you took him or not, it might be worth the gamble. I don't know that it will pan out. Having a new venue for RG3 would probably not be too bad for him, plus the expectations coming in when you get him for virtually nothing. I would say someplace else is very much a viable option for RG3.
What about Sam Bradford's performance? You mentioned him. He's just looked really good in Chip Kelly's offense.
I went to the Eagles training camp, their first live practice in the stadium for our around the league and our training camp coverage. And two things jumped out at me. One, how good he looked then as quick as it was. Sam Bradford's a good quarterback. Now, he's got to stay healthy. He's got to be able to sustain it. There's no one's ever questioned his skill. That practice, I was shocked at how quickly the ball was coming out, which tells me that he kind of gets what they want, and he's seeing it pretty good, pretty quickly, all but in a practice. Second thing that was the big news when he came out. He had no knee brace on. And in talking with him afterwards, I asked about that, and he said, hey, the last time I got hurt, I had a knee brace on. I'm either fine or I'm not. I feel good. And he looked good then, and he certainly looked good the other night. So it's going to, that bodes well for the Eagles. Although, and I talked about it this week on the pregame for the Buffalo and Pittsburgh game that we did when we had the game day morning crew get together, was the hit by Terrell Suggs on Sam Bradford, I think, was a huge shot over the bow for any team that wants to run these read options, because Dean Blandino made it very clear from the league office that was a legal hit by Terrell Suggs on the quarterback. So if I'm given Sam Bradford's history, and as good as he's looking, if I'm Chip Kelly, I'm thinking real long and hard as to how many of these types of plays I want to run, because the league has made it very clear. And I know for a fact defensive coordinators are teaching those ends now. If you're unblocked, it means read option. And if it's read option, I don't care who gives the ball off or not. You go hit the quarterback like Suggs, not late, and from the knees to the neck. But those quarterbacks are going to get beat like an old mattress in spring cleaning.
Last question for you in the minute I have left, because you did the pregame of that Bills-Steelers game, and then after it, all the quarterbacks looked really good. And Rex today chose Tyrod Taylor. What do you think of that, Coach?
Interesting. Certainly you can see that with Rex. Rex envisions, let's remember how he got to 2 AFC championship games with a quarterback that was sub 60% and threw more interceptions than touchdowns. But he's got, in his words, the best defense he's ever had. Some of my Ravens former Ravens, when Rex was my coordinator, might want to take exception with that. Right. But Rex has said this is the best defense he's ever had. Feels good about his running game, although notwithstanding letting go of Fred Jackson and what's the health of LaShawn McCoy. But give me a quarterback that can run around and do some things on third down, extend a couple drives, and Son, just don't turn the ball over. The question is, where does that leave E.J. Manuel? You cannot, and I said it in my piece that's today on NFL.com, you cannot have E.J. Manuel on your team if he's not the starter, because that just means every day Doug Whaley, who's the general manager, has to come in and stare at the guy that he took in the first round, even though he was the assistant general manager, as a reminder that you screwed up in taking this guy in the first round because he's not my starting quarterback. So it's hard for me to imagine that Tyrod Taylor, and I had not seen that where they had said he was going to be the starter. You got Matt Castle there as a good, capable backup, can step in. We know what functionality he presents. Hard for me to imagine that E.J. Manuel is going to sit there as the backup, and that's going to stress the organization.
Coach, appreciate the time. Thank you. We'll chat down the line, hopefully.
All right, man.
You bet. That's at Coach Billick on Twitter.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.